안녕하세요. 미국개미입니다. 오늘은 성장주 투자의 대가인 소프트뱅크의 손정희 회장에 대해서 알아보도록 하겠습니다.
What is SoftBank?
A really difficult question to answer these days. The telecoms group, the semiconductor group, it's now more of an investment group.
A huge and very aggressive hedge fund.
It is the corporate expression of one man.
A journey for people to ride alongside the mind of Masayoshi Son.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Right at the center of it, you've got Masayoshi Son.
The 63-year-old founder of SoftBank. He's like no other chief executive in Japan.
He is not afraid of taking risks.
He's a risk-addicted billionaire.
He's exploring ways to become rich, exploring ways to change the world. He identified technology as the way to do that.
In next 10 years, I would continue to invest more and more.
He's driven by power, the desire to make SoftBank one of the world's biggest companies.
He's more investing in vision.
If you go in the room and ask for $100 million and he says, well, I was going to give you 500 million, so why do you only need 100? If you don't have a good answer for the 500, you're not getting the money. He's small, physically small, and he's calm. What lies beneath is this vigorous shark.
He set up SoftBank in 1981 as a software distributor. His breakthrough deal came in 2000 when he invested $20 million in Alibaba just a year after the Chinese company was created.
To turn 20 million into 100 billion and more, that doesn't happen. You know, even the best venture capitalists in the world who put a sliver of money in Airbnb or a sliver of money in Google, they never have hit anything like that. Even through the pandemic, we've seen Alibaba only get stronger and its share price go higher.
We all want to be that investor. He actually was that investor. Is he the world's most astute tech investor? Or is he the luckiest guy on the planet?
He listened to Jack Ma's speech for 5 minutes and he saw the twinkle in his eyes and decided to invest in the company.
I could smell him, right? We are same animal.
He believes in the future. He probably has the biggest guts in the world on doing investment. Yeah, right. Very few people in the world have that courage.
Too much guts, sometimes I lose a lot of money.
I know.
He had so much conviction in Jack Ma and what the potential of Alibaba was that all these times that it was in the money, he never took a penny off the table. He just wanted to ride it. And he's been proven right. The 2006 Vodafone Japan deal, that's a key moment because it creates a ballast to keep the company stable.
Almost as important as buying Vodafone's Japan business was the decision to be the launch carrier for the Apple iPhone. You have, this outsider offering an American phone to Japanese consumers, and the whole question of whether Japanese consumers would dump the Japanese product in favor of an American product seemed like everything he does, it was a gamble. And it obviously paid off enormously.
The current state of the puzzle, it's in flux because one of the key pieces is in the process of being sold, which is ARM. You asked me 4 or 5 years ago what SoftBank is. I would say SoftBank is a company with ARM at the core and Masa running around the world telling everyone that this company and its chip design will be the basis upon which the Internet of Things will be built off of, all these connected devices. He didn't have the money to pay for ARM. And so he needed to find people who would put money in to back the transaction. What he does discover is that there's a bunch of capital in the Middle East that just wants to invest with him. And that's how we get the Vision Fund.
The Vision Fund launched in 2017 as the world's largest technology fund. The largest investors in the fund were the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi. Saudi Arabia was also a big investor.
It was really a marriage of minds between Mohammed bin Salman and Masayoshi Son. On the one hand, a young authoritarian leader who's in a hurry to transform a society and wean it off oil, tech obsessed, but is very concerned about looking like dumb money on the global stage. So in comes Masa and says, look, I'm the world's best technology investor and I have ARM and I can see the future of connected devices and you're trying to build these mega cities in Saudi Arabia. Let's do this together. Fast forward to today, ARM's operations under SoftBank basically stunk. The high-tech stuff, the stuff that was the future, is basically a cash-guzzling, cash-burning disaster. He got asked once, so how did you convince Mohammed bin Salman to give you $45 billion in an hour? And he says, no, $45 billion in 45 minutes. 1 billion every minute.
You've got so much money in a fund. You're not just buying a little part of that industry. You're buying the future of that industry.
What if he says, okay, if you don't take my money, I'm going to go give quadruple that amount to your rival? It's not all lovey-dovey. People don't see that brutal side of Masa. He used capital as a weapon with the Vision Fund.
It poured money into various startups from Uber, Didi, Oyo, Slack, sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and brought the valuations of technology companies to new heights.
What do they know about venture investing? So the first few years of the Vision Fund are marked by like enormous mistakes.
These companies weren't making money, and when it came time for them to do IPOs, investors weren't convinced. We had this crisis at WeWork that really raised questions in the Vision Fund strategy. After the pandemic struck, it also showed the vulnerability of the Vision Fund with some of the major bets like Uber and Didi being hit.
But if you think about a venture portfolio, they're in 88 companies, maybe slightly more. Their point is some of them will be duds, some of them will be okay, and some of them may be Alibaba level potential, maybe not the full Alibaba. And as long as they get enough of those, it doesn't really matter what the other stuff does. We recruited this Google man called Nikesh Arora, Indian, very successful. Nikesh wanted Masa to pay down his debt, take less risks. These two had a spectacular falling out. At the same time, another Indian whose Masa had recruited, Rajiv Misra from Deutsche Bank. His rise really begins and takes off as Nikesh's plummets.
He brings in a guy called Sago. He is Goldman Sachs in Japan, super cautious. And so you've got Deutsche and Goldman Sachs characters now merged. You've got a lot of complexity around everyone second guessing what everyone else is up to.
Another character was Marcelo Clau, who was recruited into SoftBank and then put in charge of Sprint and is now playing a major role across the portfolio. ARM gets agreed to be sold to NVIDIA in a $40 billion deal. They have Sprint, which they've merged with T-Mobile, another part of the jigsaw puzzle.
And he's one of the great men of India.
He's very politically savvy. He can strike up a relationship with most of the world's leaders, whether it's Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin.
And from the moment Trump was elected president, Masa was courting him. He needed the Sprint deal to get through. Masa goes to Trump Tower and says to him, I'm going to create 50,000 new jobs in America. I'm going to invest $50 billion. US regulators finally allowed Sprint and T-Mobile to merge. He had cracked the code of Trump.
Now it's flush with money, so it has 80 billion in cash.
One thing you should never expect Masa to do is to have cash in the bank account and not spend it. And that's how you get to the other piece of the jigsaw puzzle, that NASDAQ whale story.
Towards the end of August 2020, we started to notice some quite strange stuff going on in US stock markets and particularly in tech stocks. The NASDAQ index, the composite and the NASDAQ 100 were both up about 12-13% over the month. Tesla was up 70-odd%, and Amazon and Google and all these stocks had an absolutely blistering run. The options market is a place where investors can effectively bet on future stock price movements or try and hedge themselves against them. The talk was of a whale, a huge account, people couldn't figure out who it was, that was just gobbling up these options. Our sort of ringing around on this led us to SoftBank. Our instincts were saying, someone's got this wrong, but to our surprise, it turned out to be right. And that tells you a lot about Masa-son as a character. He's not afraid to take the market completely by surprise. He's not afraid to make extremely aggressive bets in markets that he doesn't normally play in. I mean, veterans in the equities options market were telling us they'd never seen anything like the scale of the bets that were going on here. It started to look at a certain point like SoftBank was morphing into a huge and very aggressive hedge fund. You never know where SoftBank are going to crop up next.
He's a gambler and he takes big risks. And he's undoubtedly successful.
I really don't see a scenario where Masa hoards cash. Ultimately, we come back to the casino, and the question is, are you going to take your chips off the table and walk away, or are you going to push it all out and go all in? Everything in his career suggests that he's always all in.
이번 동영상은 여기까지입니다. 이번 동영상이 도움이 되셨다면 좋아요와 구독 버튼을 눌러주시면 감사하겠습니다.
올려보세요.
올인!
아이고 마님 과도한 돈놀이는 아니되옵니다.
돈 놓고 돈 먹기는 순수 자본주의라고. 올인!
미안하오.
왜 이래?
많이, 여러분.
다음 동영상은 분산투자 유럽편입니다.